We are on the record. My name is Kelly Rusk. I'm videographer for Galco Litigation Services. Today's date is February 17th, 2020, and the time is 10:09 a.m. This video deposition is being held in Knoxville, Tennessee in the matter of Barry Stavas versus Purdue Pharma et al. In the Circuit Court for Sullivan County, Tennessee. The deponent is Cheryl Herbold, and counsel will be noted on the stenographic record. The court reporter is Jeff Rusk, and will now swear the witness.
Okay, Ms. Herbold, I'll go ahead and swear you. Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give you the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, thank you. Just speak up, sorry.
Oh, sure.
Good morning, Ms. Is it Herbold?
Yes.
Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
Please state your full legal name.
Cheryl Lynn Herbold.
And where do you currently live?
The address?
Yes. And do you understand that you are here today testifying pursuant to a subpoena?
Yes.
Okay. And I've handed you, we've marked two exhibits. First exhibit is Exhibit 1 to your deposition. Do you recognize that document?
I do.
And is that a copy of the subpoena that you received in this matter?
Yes, it does appear so.
Okay. And then Exhibit 2 is the notice of deposition for your appearance today. Do you recognize that document as well?
I do.
Okay. When did you first learn that you would have to sit for a deposition in this case?
It was the Saturday before Christmas.
Okay.
About 8 o'clock in the morning, there was a knock at my front door. I'm not sure what his title would be, but it was who served me the subpoena.
Okay.
Gave the paper to me.
Okay. And then when was the first time you talked to a lawyer with respect to the subpoena?
It would have been, I'm not sure exact date, it would have been the first week of January 2020.
And who was the lawyer that you spoke to about the subpoena?
With this firm, I'm blanking on
With
her
Ropes
last
and
name.
Gray?
Yes, with Ropes and Gray.
Okay.
Yes.
Did she call you or did you call her?
I called her.
Okay. Did you have a pre-existing relationship with this individual?
I did not.
Okay. How did you know to talk to that individual?
When I'd been subpoenaed, of course, I didn't know what was going on. The subpoena had said Purdue. I didn't work for Purdue, so I wasn't quite sure what was going on. It was the holidays, so I figured most businesses closed down during the holidays. I'll wait it out. When I didn't receive any communications, I called Mallinckrodt, assuming that this was all type, because it had et al. So I assumed Mallinckrodt was, or Covidian when I worked there, was involved. I called and asked for their legal department, spoke to a lady, I think her name was Christine, and I told her I'd been subpoenaed on behalf of Covidian, and that if she could give me any insight to what was going on. I can't remember, she said she was going to take and ask some of her colleagues, I guess, and then she would get back to me. She got back to me either later that day or the next day, and said she had heard back from one person, and they didn't know what was going on, so she was still waiting on someone else. I then reached out to, since I still felt like I had no clue of what to do, what was going on, I reached out to a former Covidian employee.
Okay. Which one was that?
Chris Clark.
Okay. And did Mr. Clark tell you he had been deposed in this case?
He did.
Okay.
That he had received, excuse me, that he had received a subpoena.
Okay. Did he tell you he'd actually sat for a deposition as well?
I believe so.
Okay. Did you have a chance to talk with Mr. Clark about the substance of his deposition, or what questions he was asked, things like that?
Not the questions he was asked, no. Just
Okay.
asked who represented him.
Okay. And then he gave you the name of someone to call at Ropes and Gray, is that right?
He did.
Okay. When did you learn, what did you do in advance of today to prepare for the deposition?
Met with counsel. I looked over my resume to see what I had listed for my time at Covidian. That was pretty much it.
Okay. Did you look at any documents that you may have had in your possession from your time at Covidian?
I did not.
Did you look at any documents that were supplied to you by counsel for Mallinckrodt?
Objection, I'll instruct you can answer yes or no.
Yes.
Okay. Do you know approximately how many documents they showed you?
More than 6.
Okay. And can you say generally were there emails or other types of documents?
A combination of documents, emails and other documents.
Did you recognize the documents?
I did not.
Okay. When you, and what was the time period of your employment at Covidian?
I don't remember the specific date. It was the spring of 2010, and then I left the company in the fall of, I think, October of 2011.
Okay, so about a year and a half or so, is that fair?
Correct.
Okay. Have you ever been deposed before?
I have not.
Okay. Just a few things about today. We're not going to be here all day, but it's not an endurance test. So if you need a break or something, you feel free to request one or just say, can we take a break? I'm happy to do that. But if a question is pending, I'd ask that you answer the question first before we take a break.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yes.
And then I'm actually coming off a cold, full disclosure, so I may be a little difficult to understand. If there's something I say that you don't understand or you have a hard time hearing the question, I'm happy to restate or rephrase or just repeat the question for your benefit. But if you answer the questions that I ask, I'll assume you understood. Is that okay?
That is correct.
And then finally, it's because we have a stenographer here, I'll need you to give verbal answers to my questions,
Sure.
as opposed to like a nod of the head or a shake of the head or a like yes or no or something like that would be a good response. Is that fair?
Sure.
Okay. Are you represented by counsel at this deposition?
I am.
And who are your attorneys for the purpose of the deposition today?
Josh Goldstein and Jess Soto.
Okay. And is it your understanding these lawyers are your personal lawyers for today's deposition?
I do understand that.
Okay. And are you paying for their legal services?
I am not.
Okay. Do you know who's paying for legal services?
I believe Covidian or Mallinckrodt.
Okay. Did you enter any sort of representation agreement with these attorneys?
I did.
Okay. And when was that executed?
I don't know the specific date, in January of this year.
Okay. Are you under the influence of any medications today?
I'm not.
Is there any reason you could think of that would prevent you from answering my questions completely and honestly today?
I don't believe so, no.
I'm going to hand you, we'll mark as Exhibit 3. Ms. Herbold, I'll represent to you, this is a copy of what was produced to plaintiffs in this case as your personnel file during your time at Covidian. I think the first page is our cover page, and then what follows behind it are the documents that were produced to us as being in your personnel file. Okay?
Okay.
If you turn over, see at the bottom of the page, there is a, Josh, I recognize this is marked as AEO, but it is her resume, so I felt like it was okay to show her this document. Do you have any problem with that?
Yeah, can you just point me to the...
No, oh, I'm sorry, Bate Stamp 2243.
No, I don't object to that.
Okay. Ms. Herbold, on document Bate Stamp 2243, is that a copy of the resume that you submitted to Covidian before you got that job?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yes.
Did you put that together yourself?
I had a third party put it together.
Okay. And just looking, if you just look at the document, does that accurately reflect your work history and education history to that point? I guess that would have been 2009?
Objection to the form.
I believe it does, yes.
Okay. So, to your knowledge, just looking at that resume, does that appear to accurately reflect your employment and education up to that time?
Yes,
Okay. And it says you went to, is that correct?
that is correct.
Okay. Did you grow up in this area?
I did.
What specifically, which part of this area? Did you pursue any other postgraduate studies? Following your employment at Covidian, where did you go to work?
Back to my current employer.
Okay. And what position did you hold there?
I still hold it. The title's changed, but it's
And do you sell any pharmaceutical products? And which pharmaceutical products do you sell? Do you currently sell any opioid products through Bullring or Ingelheim? Prior to going to work for Covidian, did you sell any opioid products? And you said you started work at Covidian you said the spring of 2010, is that correct?
that's correct. Yes,
And you ended your employment with Covidian, you said, in the fall of 2012, correct?
that is correct.
Okay. I'm sorry, 2011. Or was it 12? I think
11. Yes, it was there about a year and a half, so that would be 11.
So just to clarify, you ended your employment with Covidian in
2011.
2011 fall, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And did you work as a salesperson of specialty pain medicine?
I don't remember my exact title, but I did represent the full portfolio that Covidian had at the time, which was Exalgo, Pensed, and Tussie Caps.
Okay. Are they the only pharmaceutical products that you sold while you worked for Covidian?
Up to recollection, yes.
Okay. And when you worked for Covidian, did it also refer to itself as Mallinckrodt?
It may have, but yeah, I remember it was always Covidian.
Okay. So you knew your employer to be Covidian. That's what you referred to it when you called it?
Yes.
When you referred to it?
Yes.
Okay. At Covidian, you sold an opioid product called Exalgo. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. And throughout your employment, did you understand Exalgo was a brand name opioid product sold by Covidian?
Yes.
And do you understand that Mallinckrodt Pharmaceuticals manufactured Exalgo?
I don't
Objection to
recall.
form.
I don't recall.
Okay. And do you recall what the active opioid ingredient was called in Exalgo?
Hydromorphone.
And is it true Exalgo was known as a long-acting, extended-release opioid product?
I do remember that, yes.
Okay. During your employment, do you recall another brand name opioid being sold called Zardamus?
I don't remember that.
Okay. Did you ever sell Zardamus?
No, not to recollection.
Were there, other than Exalgo, were there any other branded prescription opioid products you sold while working at Covidian?
Objection to form.
I don't believe so, no. I don't recall.
To your knowledge, during the course of your employment at Covidian, did the company also sell generic prescription opioid products?
I don't recall. They may have, but I don't recall.
Do you recall a product called Roxycodone?
I've heard of oxycodone, but I don't recall.
Did you ever have any responsibilities for selling Roxycodone?
No.
Objection to form.
Did you have any experience selling prescription opioid products before you came to work at Covidian?
No.
Objection to form.
All right. Is it correct that the sales market that was assigned to you at Covidian was Knoxville, Tennessee?
Yes.
Okay. And can you describe for me what that territory, what geographic footprint that territory had?
I don't remember the entire boundaries of it. Based out of Knoxville, I think up 75 to La Follette may have been included in the territory, but mostly a downtown Knoxville, West Knoxville territory.
Okay. You remember how far east your territory extended?
No, I do not.
Okay. Would it be fair to say you were familiar with the Knoxville market when you went to work for Covidian?
Objection
Yes.
to form.
Had you worked in the Knoxville market at your prior employer, Bullringer, before you worked at Covidian?
Yes.
Okay. Who did you report to when you worked at Covidien?
My first district manager was Bruce Cunningham.
How long did you report to Mr. Cunningham?
I don't recall the entire time. Bruce left at some point, and there was another district manager.
And what was that individual's name?
The second district manager was Todd Dean.
And did you report to Mr. Dean until your departure from the company?
Yes.
As a pharmaceutical salesperson for Covidien, did your job require you to visit individuals that Covidien had identified as potential writers for Exalgo prescriptions?
I don't recall the call list that they, or target planner, call planner that they gave me.
Generally speaking, though, was that true that the call list or target list was put together for you by Covidien?
Yes.
Objection to form.
Did you have any input on the names that were put on the list originally?
I don't recall that, no.
Do you know how that list was communicated to you?
I don't recall. I do recall having a, I guess it was a laptop. I don't think iPads were around at that time, so a laptop that would have a database in it, as with other companies. And whatever software they were using would have a list of the healthcare providers.
Okay. Do you recall, you ever refer to prescriptions as scripts while you worked at Covidien?
I don't recall saying that, but I've heard that before.
Okay. I may at some point today inadvertently say scripts as opposed to prescriptions. If I do that, do you understand what I'm talking about?
I do.
Okay. The individuals that were identified as potential writers for, I'll strike that. The individuals on your target list or call list, did you have an understanding that those were potential writers specifically for Exalgo?
I don't recall what my understanding was at the time.
Okay. Did you understand that you would be selling Exalgo to all the individuals on the call list or target list that you received from the company?
Yes.
Objection to form.
Okay.
Yes, generally that's throughout my career. I'm responsible for the providers that are given to me in my geography or territory.
Okay. There weren't any individuals on your call list or target list that you understood you were not supposed to be calling on for the purpose of selling Exalgo?
Objection to form.
I don't recall.
Okay. And did those individuals on the call list or target list include doctors?
Generally, a call list is doctors, nurse practitioners, and physician assistants.
Okay. Did those lists include any other healthcare providers, to your knowledge?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay. And was your understanding that Covidien provided you a list of these individuals because it wanted them to write more scripts for Exalgo?
Objection to form.
I'm sorry, could you rephrase the question?
Sure.
Or just repeat the question?
Was the purpose of giving the call list to you as a sales representative was so that you would call on them in the hopes that they would sell more Exalgo or write more scripts for Exalgo?
Same objection.
They gave me the call list as the physicians they wanted me to see in the territory and to promote my products. Correct.
Your salary, what was your salary as pharmaceutical sales at Covidien?
I don't remember specifically. I believe it was in the low 70s.
Was any part of your pay incentive-based?
The structure, as throughout the industry, or at least my experience, has always been a salary plus a bonus or commission structure of some sort.
Okay. At Covidien specifically, do you recall how that commission or bonus was determined?
Not specifically, no.
Do you know if any part of that bonus or commission was based on the volume of sales of the products that you were promoting in your territory?
Objection to form.
I don't remember specifically, but throughout my career, most of the incentive comp is based on growing market share for a product.
Okay. And when you say growing market share, does that mean increasing the number of scripts written inside your territory?
Objection to form.
It could, yes.
Okay. What else could it mean other than growing the number of scripts written for the products you're promoting?
Same objection.
I'm sorry, could you restate the question again?
Yeah,
Or
I'm just trying to.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. I want to make sure we're understanding each other.
Yes.
So when you said throughout your career, most of what you remember about incentive pay was it was based on growing market share of a product, right? Was that your testimony?
Correct.
And then I asked, did that mean by growing market share, increasing the number of scripts for your products written inside your territory? Is that true?
That could be true, yes. That would how you would grow market share.
Okay. Is there any other way to grow market share other than increasing the
not that
volume
I
of
can-
scripts written?
Not that
Objection to form.
It's okay.
Not that I can think of.
Okay. And Exalgo was one of the products that you understood your bonus or commission would be based on?
Correct.
Other than increasing market share, were there any other factors in determining your bonus or commission?
Objection to form.
I don't recall.
What type? Do you remember the names of any of the incentive-based programs that you were part of at Covidian?
I don't recall any names of them. I remember there was a contest for Tussie caps.
Were there any other incentive-based contests that were used for Exalgo?
I don't recall.
Do you recall something called the Sales Incentive Compensation Plan, or SICP?
Not specifically.
Okay. Were you trained on how to market Exalgo on behalf of Covidian?
I did attend 2 training sessions with Covidian. The first one was in the spring of 2010, what some we would refer to as initial sales training. And then at some point, there was an advanced sales training class.
When did you receive the initial sales training?
I don't remember a specific date. It would have been shortly after being hired. Generally, there's a home study period, and then you go to sales training.
Do you recall approximately how long your initial sales training took? Number of hours?
Probably, I think there was a week. We were in St. Louis for a week,
Okay.
or up to a week.
And was that in classes in St. Louis?
Yes, they had a classroom.
Okay. So was it how many hours total classroom instruction do you recall receiving for that initial sales training?
I don't recall specifically. Generally, it usually goes 8 to 5 with breaks. Some days may be shorter than others.
So somewhere around 40 hours that week. Classroom instruction, is that your recollection?
Not specifically, but that sounds agreeable.
And then you mentioned home study. How much home study did you do as part of the initial sales training?
I don't remember specifically. Generally, it's could be a week, week and a half.
How many hours total do you recall of home training, home study?
It would be a guess. I don't recall specifically.
You think it was more than 10 hours?
I would agree to that, yes.
Okay. And then when did you receive your advanced training?
I don't remember specifically when, but it was sometime within my tenure at Covidian.
Do you remember approximately how long after you started you received the advanced training?
I don't. It's been a couple of months, at least.
Where was the advanced training done?
I believe it was in St. Louis as well, or outside of St. Louis.
Did that also comprise classroom training?
I believe so, yes, yes.
you remember approximately how many hours you spent doing the classroom training or for the advanced session?
I do not.
Was it, do you think it was more or less than the 40 hours you spent for the initial sales training?
I don't remember.
Did the advanced training also include home study?
I don't remember that, no.
Do you think that was a week-long session in St. Louis for the advanced training?
I don't recall. It may have been shorter. I don't remember.
Okay. Were you trained to market Exalgo as having a low risk of addiction?
Objection to form.
I don't recall that.
Were you trained to market Exalgo as tamper resistant?
Objection to form.
I don't recall that.
Did Covidian train you to focus on high volume opioid prescribers in your territory?
Objection.
I don't recall that.
Do you remember whether your whether Covidian referred to high volume opioid prescribers in your territory with a particular title like top 5 or 3-star?
Objection to form.
I don't recall that.
Did Mallinckrodt, did Covidian give you specific instructions how to interact with a prescriber in your territory?
Other than promote the promotional message, no.
Were you given instruction to perform in-person visits with your targets?
Not that I recall, no.
Did you in fact perform in-person visits to your targets?
Yes.
Okay, but that was not part of the training you received from Covidian?
Objection to form.
We were trained on the promotional message.
Right, and I'm asking about the actual manner in which you're supposed to interact with the physicians. Did you ever receive training from Covidian about that?
Objection to
The
form.
manner of interaction.
What do you
Same
mean by
objection.
what do you mean by the manner?
So you just were asked a question about whether you went and performed in-person visits to prescribers to promote Exalgo, correct?
Correct.
Okay. How did you know to go to the doctor for an in-person visit? Was that part of the training from Covidian?
I don't recall that.
Okay.
It's something I've done throughout my career.
Okay. Did you call on the telephone prescribers to promote Exalgo?
No, I don't recall that.
Did you take Exalgo prescribers out or potential Exalgo prescribers out for lunches?
Objection to form.
Out for lunches? No.
Did you bring lunches in to the potential prescribers for Exalgo?
Yeah, that's industry standard practice.
Okay. Was there any training you received from Covidian on how to do that?
Receiving a training? No, I don't believe so.
Did you-
I don't remember.
Did Covidian give you budgets for lunches to provide to prescribers?
They very well may have. I don't recall a budget, but again, every company is always, or every district manager has given us a budget.
Okay. Did you take prescribers out to dinner?
No,
Did you bring dinners in for prescribers in their offices?
not that I recall. It's been lunches.
Okay. Did you perform webinars for your targets?
My time at Covidian?
Yes.
No,
Did you
not that I
perform-
remember.
Okay. Did you perform speaker events for your targets?
At Covidian, I don't remember.
Were you instructed to leave copay vouchers for your targets at Covidian?
I don't know if I was instructed to do so. That's general practice if the product has a savings card.
And just, can you describe what a savings card is?
It's a copay card, like you had mentioned.
And is the purpose of the card for the physician to hand the card to patients who would otherwise have to pay a copay to receive their product, their Covidian product? That card would allow them to not have to pay that copay, is that correct?
Well, a savings card depends on the manufacturer, depends on how the card's set up. Generally, it doesn't guarantee a zero copay. There's a dollar value determined by the manufacturer of what that card will cover, dependent on what the person, the patient's managed care plan charges that patient, the card may or may not cover the entire amount.
Do you recall handing out savings cards for Exalgo?
Objection to form.
I don't recall, but I would assume that would be a normal practice.
Were you aware that Covidien in fact had savings cards available for Exalgo during your time there?
I don't recall.
Okay. Can you think of any instance where any of your interactions with a prescriber was not approved by Covidien?
Not that I recall, no.
Okay. Is it fair to say that through the interactions with your potential prescribers or targets that you expected this would result in more prescriptions being written for Exalgo?
Objection to form.
Could you restate the question?
Yeah, is it fair to say that through the interactions with the targets that were on your list, you expected this would result in increased prescriptions for Exalgo? Is that correct?
Same objection.
I don't know if I would say I expected it. I mean, that's my job as a sales professional, to go in, promote the product, educate the healthcare provider. If that provider sees the patient type and believes that medication may be a benefit, then he or she would write it.
On average, how long would you spend during in-person visits to targets?
Again, I don't recall at Covidien. Generally, it depends on the office. Generally speaking, or currently speaking, some providers have guidelines for representatives where you have to come, and bring a lunch. Some have certain times that they're willing to talk to representatives. Sometimes you're free to walk in and out of the office, and just, when you're there, wait for the physician, which could be a few minutes. It could be a half hour, it could be an hour. Just depends on their schedule.
Did Covidien ever prescribe a particular time frame that you were supposed to be spending with each target on your list?
I don't believe so. I've never been given a time frame throughout my career. I believe no.
Did Covidien ever say, well, you should only wait a certain amount of time to see a target, after which you should move on and go to the next person on your list?
No, I don't remember that instruction, no.
Were there guidelines at Covidien telling you what you could and could not do on a prescriber visit?
I don't recall that.
Did you use sales pieces when you visited your targets to sell Exalgo?
Objection to form.
I can't specifically recall them, but generally, yes, there's either actual paper pieces or software on the device.
Did Covidien supply the materials that you would use in speaking with a target?
They would have, yes.
And you said you don't recall what types of material or literature that Covidien supplied you?
I do not recall.
Can you recall an instance where you discussed materials or literature with a prescriber that was not supplied by Covidien?
I do not recall.
Did you ever leave any materials with a target after the sales call?
I may have.
Did you recall what you may have left?
Sometimes, I don't specifically recall with Covidien, sometimes there are, the savings cards, and there may be what they say a leave-behind piece. It may have general information for the physician about the product and a package insert.
And was all that material supplied by Covidien?
It would have been, yes.
Can you recall an instance where you left any materials with a target that did not come from Covidien?
No, I cannot.
Can you think of any instance where a prescriber or target ever raised concerns to you about the truthfulness or accuracy of the material that you were given from Covidien?
I cannot, no.
how often would supervisors go into the field with you for target calls?
I don't remember how often. Generally, in my experience, it's been every 4 to 6, maybe 8 weeks.
So every 8 weeks, that's fair?
Potentially, yes. That would be fair.
And that would include both of the supervisors you had during your time?
Correct. They would have, yeah. Or they should have.
Is it your recollection that throughout your tenure at Covidien, the company would regularly examine prescription writing patterns throughout your territory?
Objection to form.
I'm sorry, could you restate the question?
Yeah. Is it fair to say during your time at Covidien that you were given information from Covidien telling you what the prescription writing volume was in your territory for opioids?
Same objection.
I don't recall specifically.
Do you recall do you know anyone addicted to opioids?
I do not.
Do you know anyone who abuses opioids?
I do not.
Do you know anyone who has taken an illegally diverted opioid?
I do not.
Do you have any understanding of the opioid problems in Tennessee?
Objection to form.
As I sit here today, I understand through recent news articles, newspaper articles, segments on the local news of some issues going on.
Like, such as what? Can you describe them?
Sure, that the police force and the EMTs are now carrying a product to counteract overdoses. And then recently there was on the news about a doctor's office up in Oneida that had been under, I'm not sure what the right term is, but had been questioned, I guess, for practicing.
Did you ever hear such stories when you were working at Covidien?
I don't recall.
When you worked at Covidien, did you have an understanding of what opioid abuse was?
I don't recall what my understanding was.
At Covidien, did you have an understanding what opioid addiction was?
I don't recall what my full understanding was.
When you worked at Covidien, did you have an understanding of how opioids are diverted illegally?
Objection to form.
Again, I don't remember what my knowledge was at that time.
Well, do you recall ever hearing the term opioid abuse during your time at Covidien?
I know the term. I don't know if I knew when I was at Covidien or not.
Did you ever hear the term opioid addiction at Covidien?
I don't recall.
Did you ever hear the term diversion when you were at Covidien?
I don't recall.
Do you recall ever discussing opioid abuse associated with opioids with any of your targets at Covidien?
I don't recall.
Do you recall discussing opioid addiction with any of your targets at Covidien?
I don't recall.
And while at Covidien, do you recall ever discussing opioid diversion with any of your targets?
I don't recall.
When you worked at Covidien, were you generally aware of what the opioid prescription rates were in your territory?
What do you mean by prescription rates?
Volume of prescriptions being written for any opioid product within your territory. Were you generally aware of that during your time at Covidien?
I would have been provided data on the physicians I was calling on, yes.
Okay.
I don't specifically remember what they were.
Yeah, and I'm not asking you to remember that far back, the numbers. I'm just saying, generally speaking, did Covidien make you aware of the volume of opioids being prescribed by targets on your list?
Objection to form.
I believe so.
Okay. Were you made aware of the volume of opioids being prescribed by healthcare providers that were not on your list, for example, in other territories that Covidien covered?
Not that I recall, no.
Okay, and so how did Covidien give you information about the number of opioids being written by your prescribers?
I don't remember specifically what Covidien provided, but as a general rule, most companies will give data based on a third party, not sure what the right term would be, data collection agency. Typically it's IMS, although I don't know what IMS actually stands for.
Do you recall specifically receiving IMS data at Covidien?
I don't recall specifically, no.
Do you recall in what format you received the volume prescribing information you just testified about with your targets?
I don't recall specifically. My assumption would be it would have been on the laptop it could be Excel or some sort of software.
Do you recall how often you were provided that information about the volume of opioids being written by your targets?
I do not recall how often.
Did you ever have conversations with other sales reps at Covidien concerning opioid abuse in Tennessee?
Not that I recall.
Did you receive any training at Covidien how to identify problematic opioid prescribers?
Objection to form.
I don't recall specifically, no.
Do you recall seeing anything troubling with respect to any of the targets that you sold Exalgo to in Tennessee?
Same objection.
No, I don't recall that.
We were told to treat physicians, pharmacies, or nurse practitioners in Tennessee differently than with any other. Strike that. Did you also call on pharmacies?
Objection to form.
I believe so, yes. That's standard industry practice, usually 2 pharmacy calls a day.
How many? I'm sorry.
2.
2 a day?
2 a day, yeah,
And
generally. Yeah.
Do you think you followed that standard while you were Covidien as well?
I can't say for sure.
Were pharmacies also part of a target list you received from Covidien, similar to healthcare providers?
I don't recall that. I don't remember ever getting a list of pharmacies.
How did you know which pharmacies to visit within your territory?
Sometimes offices would, and still today, I'll have providers say, we're having, my patient wanted to get a product and Walmart didn't have it stocked. Could you go see why they don't have it stocked? So sometimes the physicians would ask us. Sometimes you would, and still go to the area pharmacies, wherever your offices are.
Do you remember approximately how many pharmacies you called on in your territory during your time at Covidien?
I do not.
Was it more than 20?
I would assume so.
Was it more than 50?
It could be with repetitive calls, yeah. I don't remember how many pharmacies were there.
At Covidien, did you receive news reports regarding opioid abuse or diversion?
Not that I recall.
At Covidien, did you ever review material from the Tennessee Department of Health regarding Tennessee's opioid abuse problem?
Not that I
Objection.
recall. Not that I recall.
Do you recall generally having any understanding while you worked at Covidien whether Tennessee had an opioid abuse problem?
Objection.
I don't recall what my knowledge was at Covidien since leaving. And again, fresh memory, recent news. I have an understanding now.
Did Covidien maintain a no-call list of prescribers?
Objection to form.
I don't recall that, no.
Were you ever told by Covidien to stop calling on a particular target in Tennessee?
Objection to form.
Not that I recall.
How often would you interact with Covidien's sales compliance department?
I don't recall. They may have been at training, but I don't recall interacting with them.
You don't recall a specific instance outside of possibly this initial training or advanced training where you may have interacted with Covedian's compliance department?
Objection to form.
I don't recall, no.
By the time you went to work for Covidian in the spring of 2010, were you familiar with the term pill mill?
I'm sorry, could you restate the question?
Sure. By the time you went to work for Covidian in the spring of 2010, were you familiar with the term pill mill?
I don't know if I was familiar with it or not at that time.
Do you recall ever using that term when you worked at Covidian?
I don't recall.
Do you recall hearing other Covidian employees use the term pill mill?
I don't recall.
Do you have any understanding of what a pill mill is?
I don't recall if I understood at Covidian, again, as I sit here today, with recent knowledge. In the media, it's been portrayed as offices that write a large amount of prescriptions.
Is there any other definition or characteristic of a pill mill that you're aware of as you sit here today?
Objection to form.
No, that's my general understanding.
During your time at Covidian, did the company give you any guidance about pill mills?
I don't recall.
Did Covidian tell you to look out for pill mills?
Objection.
I don't recall.
Did Covidian tell you how to identify a pill mill?
Objection.
I don't recall.
Did Covidian tell you what to do if you did identify a pill mill?
I don't recall.
Did Covidian tell you to avoid pill mills?
I don't recall.
Did pill mill have a negative connotation when you were at Covidian?
Objection to form.
I don't recall.
Did Covidian ever share with you a list of suspected pill mills in your territory?
Same objection.
I don't recall.
Do you recall ever having training with respect to the signs of a pill mill?
Objection.
I don't recall that.
Do you recall having any understanding of the risks or dangers that were caused by an opioid pill mill?
Objection.
I don't recall that.
In your experience, to your knowledge, did you detail pill mills when you worked at Covidian?
Objection.
I don't recall that, no.
At Covidian, did you ever form any opinion about the impact of pill mills in your territory?
Objection.
I don't recall.
During your time at Covidian, did the company assign you a pill mill as a target?
Objection.
I don't recall.
If Covidian had determined that you had a pill mill on your target list, would you have wanted to know that?
Objection.
Can you repeat one more time?
If Covidian had determined that you had a pill mill on your target list, would you have wanted to know that?
Same objection.
I don't recall, but sitting here today, I would have wanted to know that, yes.
And why? Why do you say that?
If there was any, with any office, if there was any reason or any information that I should or should not be in an office, I'd want to know that.
And sitting here today, why would having a pill mill on your target list supply a reason why or why not you should not be in that office?
Objection.
If the company told me not to go into an office, then I should not be in that office.
And you understand that that one of the reasons that you would not or might be told not to go to an office is because the company considered that to be a pill mill?
Objection.
Whether it's a pill mill, whether it's other criteria that the company has deemed for me to not be in that office.
Sorry, I mean, cut you off.
No, I was going to say, sometimes there's specialties or specialists that are not within the acceptable promotions. You maybe wouldn't promote a diabetic product to a respiratory therapist. That might be an exclusion.
Can you think of any other criteria that may have been communicated to you while you were at Covidian suggesting you should not be visiting a particular office on your target list.
Objection.
I don't recall. No.
All right, let's take a break.
Going off the record at 11.
You mic'd up? No, I'm not up here. So I'm not ready. But I'm ready now.
Okay, we're back on the record at 11:13.
I handed you a document identified Exhibit 4 to your deposition.
Yes.
Do you recognize that document?
I do not.
This document, first page is an email from Bruce Cunningham. That was your supervisor at Covidian, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and you see that you're identified as a recipient on the email that he sent on December 20th, 2010?
I do.
Okay. Any reason to think you didn't receive this email on or about this date?
I don't recall it, but no doubt if I received it or not. No.
And the email starts off, Charlotte All-Stars. Do you remember him referring to the group of reps that he oversaw as Charlotte All-Stars?
I do not.
And do you recall that your territory was part of a region that included Charlotte?
It may have been the district name.
Okay, so district was Charlotte, and your territory of Knoxville was included as part of that district. Is that your recollection?
It may have been, yes.
Okay. Do you recognize the other names on that list? Michael Bell.
I don't recall that.
Do you know Charlotte Rasaboski?
I don't recall that.
Do you know George Pate?
There was a rep, Gus Pate. I believe he went by.
Okay. Do you know where his territory was?
I think it was in the Tri-Cities
Okay.
in Tennessee.
You know Heather Duncan?
I do know Heather Duncan.
Who is that?
She was a colleague at Covidian.
Okay. Do you know where her territory was?
It was adjacent to my territory. I don't remember the boundaries of her territory, though.
Do you remember if it was east, west, north, south?
I think my territory went north, so hers may have gone east.
Okay. Do you think it was your territory followed by Ms. Duncan's territory followed by Mr. Pate's territory? The eastern part of Tennessee?
Possibly, yeah.
Do you know who Jane Beckham is?
I don't recall that.
Do you know who John Severes is?
No.
You know Matt Kwiatkowski?
No, I don't recall him.
You know Richard Keene?
I do recall Richie Keene.
You know where his territory was?
Again, not the whole territory or other boundaries, but it was adjacent to mine. I think he went over, may have gone over into North Carolina.
Do you know Roxanne Holbrooks is?
I don't recall her.
Mr. Cunningham writes to all these individuals, including yourself, I have attached Cheryl's business plan as an example of what your plan may look like. Thank you, Cheryl. Keep in mind that your business plan will change over time. Use this as an opportunity to strategize and continue to gain a better understanding where your opportunities are present. Did I read that correctly?
That's what it states, yes.
Does looking at that email and then looking at the ensuing or the attached document with your name on, does that refresh your recollection about your having created this document?
Objection.
No, it does not.
Okay. Any reason to doubt that you did create the document that's attached to the email in Exhibit 4?
I don't recall it. I don't doubt it.
Okay. Do you recall, as a matter of practice, submitting business plans for your territory while at Covidian?
I don't recall, but that's been a general task, I guess is the right word to say, throughout the industry.
Okay. Turn over to page 4 of the document. This document I'll represent to you lacks a bait stamp because it's a native file, meaning it was a spreadsheet or a PowerPoint or something that was produced to us electronically, so it doesn't have the bait stamp at the bottom. So I'm just going to refer you to the actual page of the document itself.
Okay.
Are you at the page 4, which is titled Territory Strengths?
Yes.
Okay. And do you see the second one down, Territory Strength, you wrote large volume of opioids written?
I see that's written.
Do you recall writing that?
I do not.
Do you recall why you wrote that?
I do not.
Any reason to think that did not accurately reflect your observations about one strengthening your territory at that time?
I don't recall this.
I'm saying, my question was, any reason to think that does not accurately reflect your observations about strengthening your territory at that time?
I don't recall what my observations were at the time.
Well, was this your observation?
I don't recall this document, so I can't say if it was my observation at the time or not.
Did you write this?
I don't recall writing this.
Is it possible someone else filled it out for you?
I don't know if it's possible or not. I have no reason to doubt that this was my business plan, but I don't recall it.
Okay. And then on the comment section right next to that, to the right, it says, my territory is busting with the amount of opioids written. Do you see that?
I do see that.
And do you remember the basis for writing that comment?
I do not.
Do you remember generally that being true, that your territory had a very high amount of opioids being written?
Objection.
I do not remember the number of, no.
I know you don't remember the number, but generally speaking, you don't remember it being a very high volume opioid prescription area?
No, I do not recall.
Okay, go to the next page, page 5. One of the weaknesses listed, second one down, says endo representatives. Do you see that?
I do see that.
Did you know what endo pharmaceuticals was at that time?
I don't know if I knew what it was at that time or not. Sitting here today, it would have been representatives from that company.
You're talking about salespeople from that company, correct?
Just sitting here today, yes.
Okay.
That's my understanding.
Okay, and you know that endo also sold a opioid product in Tennessee, is that correct?
I do know that.
Okay, do you remember that product to be Opana ER?
I believe that's correct.
Okay. And then you write this comment, even with the realignment of endo, all of the representatives here kept their jobs. They all have strong relationships in pain, orthopedic, and primary care offices. I am striving to develop a good relationship based on trust and respect with each office. Read that correctly?
That is what it says, yes.
Okay. And why was endo representatives listed as a weakness in your territory?
I don't recall.
Was that because they were, you thought them to be effective in selling their products in your territory, which presented a threat to market share for Exalgo?
Objection.
I don't recall.
Do you recall that Opana ER was also a hydromorphone product?
Objection.
I don't recall the main ingredient, no.
Next box down, you list as another weakness, leery of hydromorphone. Do you see that?
I do see that.
And you write in the comments, for reasons that I have not fully discovered, there seems to be a concern about using hydromorphone dilaudid in this area. I am working to find the various reasons behind this line of thinking. I continue to separate dilaudid from Exalgo. Did I read that correctly?
That's what it states.
Okay. Do you recall the basis for that comment? And the concern, specifically the concern about using hydromorphone?
I do not
Objection.
recall. I do not recall.
Generally speaking, do you remember receiving concerns from your targets with respect to their prescribing hydromorphone products?
I don't recall.
Do you recall ever finding out more about the reasons why there was concern, as you observed in this comment, about using hydromorphone?
Objection.
I don't recall.
Turn over to page 7. Under territory threats. Second box down, do you see endo representatives listed there?
I do see that.
And then do you see in the comments, the local representatives have kept their jobs, although they may shift territories. In addition, the contract representatives will add share of voice. Did I read that correctly?
That
Share
is-
of what? Voice?
Voice. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, that is what it says.
Okay, and do you recall why you listed endo representatives as a territory threat?
I do not.
Turn over to page 10. Are you at the page titled Top Riders Exalgo?
Yes.
And do you know how these 5 prescribers' names were come to be listed on this page?
I do not.
Okay, do you know why part of your business plan included listing the top riders for Exalgo in your territory?
I don't recall.
On the next page, 11, under the slide, top 5 targets, Exalgo prospects. You see that?
I see that.
Okay, do you know how those 5 names came to be listed there? How those, I'm sorry, strike that. Do you know how those 5 names, how it was determined to list these 5 individuals as Exalgo prospects?
No, I do not recall.
Do you know where the basis for the numbers in the columns immediately to the right of each name came from?
I don't recall.
Okay, second column, that's Opana ER prescriptions for 2011, correct?
After the name, the column, yeah, Opana ER prescriptions 2011. Yes, correct.
So next to Joe Browder, you got the number 191. Do you see that?
I see that.
Is that information that you put in there, or did someone else at Covidia put that in there?
I don't recall.
Did you have access to information about the Opana ER prescribing habits of targets in your territory?
I don't recall what information that we had at the time. Generally, in the industry, you may have your data and competitors' data.
Any reason to think you did not receive that information about your prescriptions of your products and prescriptions about your competitors' products during your time at Covidian?
Objection.
Again, I don't recall what data that we have, but it's industry standard for every company that I've worked for. We've received data on the manufacturers or our products and the competitors' products.
Turn over to page 14. Slide on this page is titled Pharmacy Stocking. Do you see that?
I do see this.
And one of the goals, second one down listed is key geographic areas. Do you see that?
I do see that.
And the action plan is listed as surrounding pharmacies near pain management centers. Do you see that?
I see this.
Okay, and do you know what that means?
I don't recall what it means.
Do you know pain management centers that you refer to here are?
I don't recall which centers that are being referred to.
Well, when you say pain management centers, though, generally, what is that meant to mean?
Those would have been providers on my call list.
There's no other definition for pain management centers?
I mean, just the specialists that treat pain management.
Did you see what you knew to be referred to as pain clinics on your target list?
I don't recall, again, the specifics of the call list. There were individuals that worked in clinics that treated pain management.
But do you recall ever referring to those places as pain clinics or pain management clinics?
I don't recall.
Do Do you recall there ever being a difference, to your knowledge, between what's referred to as a pain clinic or pain management clinic and other healthcare providers who may write for Exalgo?
Well, there's different specialties, so there could have been, pain specialists or pain management centers. There could be orthopedics, internal medicine, rheumatologists, whatever specialties would treat pain management.
And so in this comment, one of the goals is to focus on surrounding pharmacies near pain management centers, correct?
That's what it states there, although I don't recall.
Okay. And do you know why it would be important to keep pharmacies surrounding pain management centers stocked with Exalgo?
Objection.
I don't recall. As a general practice, and I think I testified earlier that pharmacy calls, you generally call on the pharmacies around your provider's offices to make sure it's stocked, leave savings cards, speak with the pharmacist. So, that's a general practice throughout the industry.
And do you know why there's a particular focus on pharmacies surrounding pain management centers in this action plan?
Objection.
I do not recall.
Was that something that Covidian instructed you to focus on, was making sure pharmacies surrounding pain management centers were well stocked with Exalgo?
Objection.
I don't recall that. I know that they did require pharmacy calls. That was part of my job description.
And did the list of pharmacies that you're required to call on come from Covidian?
I don't recall a list being given to me.
Well, how did you know which pharmacies to call on?
Well, as I've earlier said, generally you call on the pharmacies that are around the areas, doctor's offices that you're calling on.
Did you rank or try to prioritize pharmacies ever inside your territory for Exalgo?
Objection.
I don't recall.
Well, take a look at two pages later. There is a slide called Pharmacy Stocking Exalgo. It doesn't have a page number on it. I think it's 16. You see that?
This page here, yes, I see this.
Okay, you see under this slide titled Pharmacy Stocking Exalgo, there is on the left-hand side, top 50 key Exalgo pharmacies stocked.
Sorry, I was on the wrong page. Yes, I see this.
Okay, number 1 is listed as Food City Bearding Shopping Center.
I see that.
Okay, do you recall making calls to that particular location?
Objection.
I do.
Number 2 is Food City West Town Mall. Do you see that?
I see that.
Do you recall making sales calls to that location?
Same objection.
I don't recall that location, no.
Number 3 is Bellew Drugs, Broadway. Do you see that?
I see that.
Do you recall calling on that location?
Objection.
I don't recall calling on them. I know where it is, though.
And why do you know where it is?
It is in my current territory.
Okay. Do you call on them today in your current job?
I have in the past. I don't in that area of town. The hospital's closed down, and there are not. I don't have any providers that I call on in that area.
Number 4 listed as Food City on Kingston Pike. Do you see that?
I see that.
Do you recall visiting that site during your time at Covidian?
Objection.
Not specifically, no.
Number 5 is Food City Hardin Valley. Do you recall visiting that pharmacy on your or during your time at Covidian?
Objection.
Not specifically.
And number 6 is Food City Middlebrook. Do you recall visiting that location during your time at Covidian?
Not specifically.
To your knowledge, were all of these pharmacies that are listed on the top 50 key Exalgo pharmacies stocked list in your territory while you worked at Covidian?
Looking at it now, those are in Knoxville.
And who was it? Did you list these pharmacies under the category top 50 key Exalgo pharmacies stocked?
I don't recall.
Can you tell whether or not that list came from you or from Covidian?
I cannot. I don't recall, no.
do you recall putting more emphasis or prioritizing these particular pharmacies over others with respect to Exalgo stocking?
No, I do not recall.
Do you recall the purpose of this slide was?
No, I do not recall it.
Over to page 22 of that document. This is a slide titled Planned Activities. Do you see that?
I see this, yes.
Second bullet down reads, every possible resource will be offered to each hyper-target. Did I read that correctly?
That's what it states, yes.
What's it meant by hyper-target?
I don't recall what that means.
A little further in that same bullet is written EEIF forms / Fisher books to the Exalgo targets. Do you see that?
I see that.
What is an EEIF form?
I don't know.
You know what Fisher books is?
No.
Okay, and this again are things that, I'm sorry, and then scroll down to the second to last bullet. Reads, patients' preferred pharmacies will also be hyper-targeted so that both Pensate and Exalgo are in stock and waiting. Do you see that?
I see that.
Okay, and again, in this context, do you know what hyper-targeted means?
I do not.
Okay. Having looked at some of those pages, any reason to think any of this document you did not yourself draft?
I don't recall it. I don't recall writing it. I don't recall the document.
Do you recall how often you would have been required to submit a territory business plan to Covidian?
Objection.
I don't recall how often. Generally speaking, depending on the company, sometimes you have a document to prepare for a ride-along when your manager comes to work with you, or sometimes at least once or twice a year, you may have a document to prepare.
Okay, let's give you.
No problem.
Number 5.
Page Exhibit 5 to your deposition. First question is going to be if you recognize the document.
I did not recognize the document.
Okay, this purports to be an email from someone named Preston Walker to yourself, dated April 12, 2011, correct?
I do see that, yes.
Okay, any reason to think you did not receive this in the ordinary course of business during your time at Covidian?
I don't recall it, but I don't doubt that I received it.
The subject is EEIFs, and it's got an attachment spreadsheet. This email, although it's from, would you strike all that. Who is Preston Walker?
I don't know who Preston Walker is. It doesn't give any identifying information.
Okay, at the bottom there's a signature block for someone named Arthur Morelli. Do you see that?
I see that.
Do you know who that is?
I do not, other than what it states.
Okay, other than
His signature has VP Medical Affairs Operations.
Did you have any interactions with Mr. Morelli, to your knowledge?
I don't recall, no.
In the email, is written, Dear Cheryl, a goal of the patient and product safety team within medical affairs is to collaborate with our sales force to provide Exalgo prescriber education consistent with the FDA-approved Exalgo REMS. Do you see that?
I see that.
Okay. And then a little later down in the paragraph, it says, to further assist your efforts aimed at having your Exalgo prescribers submit their EEIFs, please find attached a file of your Exalgo targets and their EEIF status. Did I read that correctly?
That's what it says, yes.
Now if we turn to the third page of Exhibit 5, you see a spreadsheet there.
I do.
And looking at that spreadsheet, do you recognize those names as Exalgo targets in your territory that were supplied by Covidian?
I don't remember if they were targets or not. There are some names that I do recognize.
Any reason to disagree with the characterization that these individuals are included on your are part of your target list for Exalgo?
I would assume that they were.
Okay. Well, looking at the names, do you recall specifically calling on any of these names?
I do recognize and remember calling on a few of these names, yes.
Which names do you recall?
Robert Sharona, Frank McNeil, and Joe Browder.
Okay. And why do you recall Mr. Sharona?
He was located within Fort Sanders Hospital in Patricia Neal Rehab Center.
And why do you recall calling on Frank McNeil?
Dr. McNeil worked at Bearden Healthcare Center, and I called on him there.
Okay, and what do you remember about Joe Browder?
Dr. Browder was, his office was located at Fort Sanders West.
Okay. Okay, there's approximately 11 names listed here, correct?
Yes.
Okay, can you recall at this time, this was in April of 2011, was this all the targets that you were calling on for Exalgo?
I can't recall that.
Do you have any reason to think that this is not the entire list of targets that you called on at this time for Exalgo calls?
I don't know if this would be or not. I don't recall the call list.
Okay. Okay, did you exhibit 6 to your deposition?
Yes.
Do you recognize this document?
I do not.
Okay, this is an email from Bruce Cunningham to yourself, and looks like the same list of individuals in his district that we saw on a prior exhibit, dated January 7th, 2011, correct?
That is correct.
Any reason to think you did not receive this in the ordinary course of business during your time at Covidian?
I don't recall it, but I don't doubt that I received it.
Okay. The subject of this email is weekly reports, and it's got an attachment called Top 5 Exalgo.xls. Do you see that?
I see that.
Okay. Mr. Cunningham writes, Charlotte All-Stars, last year you were submitting your Top 5 Exalgo report to me every Friday with updated comments. This is a great example from Cheryl, where she adds comments with the IMS weekly data. Do you see that?
I see that.
Okay. Do you recall submitting your Top 5 Exalgo reports to Mr. Cunningham every Friday?
I do not.
Do you recall sending the top 5 list that is attached to this document, which Mr. Cunningham calls a great example from Cheryl, where she adds comments with the IMS weekly data.
I don't recall this.
Let's take a look at the list. You got
Yes,
there?
I do. I have it.
You've got 5 names listed. You've got Frank McNeil, which we talked about earlier,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
You've got Helen Vodopik Goswitz. You see that?
I do.
Do you recall calling on Miss Vodopik Goswitz? Dr. Goswitz?
The name sounds familiar, but I do not recall calling on her.
Okay. And then you see Robert Sharona.
Correct.
You testified about him earlier too, correct?
Correct.
Clifford Davidson, do you see that name?
I see the name.
Do you recall calling on him?
Again, the name's familiar. I don't recall interactions with him, though.
And Joe Browder. Do you see that name?
I see that name, yes.
You recall calling him Mr. Browder during your time at Convenient too, correct?
I believe, yes.
Okay. Above Mr. McNeil's name, there's a comment written, "I am working the entire office with Dr. McNeil's practice." Do you see that?
I do.
Okay, again, these are your comments, correct?
I don't recall writing these.
Do you have any reason to doubt you did write them?
No, I have no reason to doubt, but I don't recall them.
Was it true at this time that you were calling on the entire Bearden Healthcare office during your time at Covidian?
Objection.
I would have called on the entire, the providers within that office, yes.
Okay. Okay, down at, there's a comment above Dr. Davidson's name. You write, "When we last saw Dr. Davidson, he had tried Exalgo because of fear of abuse with other opioids." Do you see that?
I do see that.
Okay, do you recall the basis of that statement?
I do not.
And then you continue to write, "Looks as if he has halted for some reason." Do you see that?
I see that.
Do you recall why Mr. or Dr. Davidson had halted using Exalgo at this time?
I do not.
And looking at, well, let's just take Dr. Davidson, for example. You have in this document, looks like access to his writing for Dilaudid, correct?
It is listed, yes.
Exalgo 16 milligram,
That's listed, yes.
and then MS Contin brand, correct?
Yes.
And then Opana ER, correct?
Correct.
And then OxyContin, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And according to the cover email here from Mr. Cunningham, this is what he refers to as IMS weekly data, correct?
That's what Bruce states, yes.
Okay. Does that refresh your recollection about how often you may have received or had access to IMS data regarding opioid prescriptions in your territory?
No, it does not, as far as when I was at my recollection of it, but obviously stating it here, it says weekly.
Okay. Any reason to doubt that was true?
No reason.
Mr. Cunningham continues in that email, "Part of our focus has to be on bringing our large targets on board. If you can get your whales, in quotes, supporting you, you will far exceed your goals." Did I read that correctly?
That's what he states, yes.
Okay. Do you recall hearing other discussions or hearing other advice from Mr. Cunningham regarding what he calls large targets or whales?
I don't recall.
Do you know what he meant by whales in this context?
I do not know what he meant.
How did you take it?
Objection.
I don't recall how I understood him.
Did you understand to mean if it's a top 5 product writer, then that person could expand the market share for Exalgo in your territory?
Objection.
Again, I don't recall how I interpreted it at the time I was with Covidian.
Generally speaking, how long have you been in pharmaceutical sales?
22 years.
Okay, and is it true, no matter where you were working, what you were doing, that you focused on your highest prescribing doctors within your territory?
Well, they would have been included in they would have been included in a call list.
Did you give them particular priority, though, among your call list, the highest writers for, or highest likely prescribers for your products that you were selling? Is that fair?
At times, it could be, yes.
Okay. Was that true at Covidien?
I don't recall.
Okay. Reading this email from Mr. Cunningham, isn't that what he's telling you to focus on?
Objection.
Large targets and whales?
Objection.
Again, I don't recall or can interpret what Bruce meant by it.
So as you read this, you have no idea what he meant?
Objection.
At the time, no. Sitting here today, he's obviously saying to call. Sitting here today, he's obviously saying to call on the top 5 Exalgo targets.
Well, that's what he said back in 2011, correct?
This is what the paper states, dated 2011, yes.
And when you got this email, you had no idea what he meant by top 5 targets?
Objection.
I don't know if I had an idea or not. I don't recall.
Do you recall following up with Mr. Cunningham and asking him what he meant by large targets or whales?
I don't recall that.
Do you recall ever having a discussion at any point during your time at Covidien about focusing your sales efforts on large targets or whales in your sales territory?
I don't recall.
The 5 names we see in the spreadsheet, to your knowledge, were there any prescribers listed there that Covidien had previously identified as pill mills?
Objection.
Not that I recall.
To your knowledge, had Covidien previously identified any of those 5 names as questionable prescribers?
Not that I recall.
To your knowledge, had Covidien previously identified any of those names as problematic prescribers?
Objection.
Not that I recall.
To your knowledge, had Covidien previously identified any of those providers as over-prescribers?
Objection.
Not that I recall.
Did you also receive information during your time at Covidien about the top 5 prescribers for Exalgo in the entire district?
I don't recall.
Okay, this is going to be Exhibit 7.
I've handed you a document identified as Exhibit 7 to your deposition. Do you recognize this document?
I do not.
It's an email from Mr. Cunningham. Again, this was your supervisor at this time, correct?
Yes, I did work for Bruce.
The email is dated March 18, 2011. It's addressed to the sales reps in his district, including yourself. Subject is top 5 list for district. Do you see that?
I do see that.
Any reason to think you did not receive this email in the ordinary course of business?
No.
Okay. He writes, Charlotte All-Stars, I am updating the top 5 list for Exalgo and Pensed for the district. This is what I have for Exalgo. Now we see 2 names listed. Frank McNeil next to your name, correct?
Correct.
And then we see Krista Cutshaw next to your name, correct?
Correct.
Do you recognize those names as top prescribers of Exalgo in your territory?
I don't recognize them as top prescribers. I recognize the names.
Okay. Any reason to doubt what Mr. Cunningham concluded, that these were the top 5 Exalgo prescribers, at least at this time, for the district-wide?
Objection.
I can't say that I don't doubt it. I don't recall it, so I don't know where or why Bruce put their names on there.
But you have no reason to doubt that. What he says is true, correct?
Taking his words on the paper, that would be, I mean, if he wrote it, then he would believe it to be true.
But you have, as you sit here today, no reason to think that wasn't true.
Objection.
I don't recall the specifics, so no, I don't believe it. I don't doubt that it's true.
He goes on to write, if there are access issues with any of these top 5 targets, let me know and I will change them. Also, please let me know how many calls you have made on them since January 1st and their current attitude toward Exalgo. These are targets I will be getting more involved with, and we will push hard to get their business. Did I read that correctly?
That's what Bruce states, yes.
Does that refresh your recollection about the approach that you took with respect to Dr. McNeil, rather, in your territory?
It does not.
What about, does that refresh your recollection about your approach with Dr. Cutshaw in your territory?
It does not.
Do you see the name Mohammed listed next to Heather?
I do.
And when it says Heather there, that means Heather Duncan, right?
I would draw that conclusion given that she's listed in the email distribution, yes.
Do you recognize the name Dr. Mohammed?
I do not.
Okay. Do you recall anything about Dr. Mohammed relevant to your time at Covidian?
I do not.
Should be Exhibit 8.
I had you Exhibit 8 for your deposition. I'd like to ask you if you recognize the document.
I do not.
This is an email from Mr. Cunningham, sent March 25th, 2011, to his district sales reps, including yourself. Subject is top district targets, and the attachment is top 5 targets, correct?
That's what it states, yes.
Mr. Cunningham writes, team, here is the top target report. Let's put focus on these targets and bring me in any additional resources we need. Please email me when you have lunches with these targets or any other big targets so I can join in. Correct?
That's what he states, yes.
Any reason to think you did not receive this email in the ordinary course of business while you worked at Covidian?
I don't recall it, but no doubt that if I received it, if I was on the distribution list.
Okay, turn over to the attachment. Got a list under the title District Top 5 Targets for Exalgo. The #1 ranked prescriber is Krista Cutshaw. Do you see that?
I do see that.
And is that accurate to best recollection that she was a nurse practitioner in Knoxville?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, and that was someone you called on, correct?
I believe she was in my territory, yes.
And then fourth name down, you see Frank Harmon McNeil.
Yes.
And that you've already testified about him. You recall that he was also one of your prescribers in your territory, correct?
He was a doctor I called on, yes, correct.
Okay. And then you see the name, the second name down in the Exalga list is Abdul Rahman Hasabu Mohammed.
I see that, yes.
Okay. Do you recognize that name?
I do not.
Okay. Just seeing the full name listed there for Dr. Mohammed, spark any recollection about any conversations or any interactions you may have had while at Covidian regarding Dr. Mohammed?
It does not.
To your knowledge, is this the first time you're hearing that name, Dr. Mohammed?
Well, there's been different Dr. Mohammeds throughout the career, but this specific one does not ring a bell, no.
And so here today, do you know anything about Dr. Abdul Rahman Mohammed and his practice?
No.
If a prescriber was included on your target list at Covidian, Was it fair to say that Covidien expected you to visit that prescriber?
Objection.
Yes, that would be expected, yes.
Is it fair to say that Covidien expected you to detail that prescriber about Exalgo?
Objection.
It would be expected to detail about all the products that I carried, if that's what they would, yeah.
Including Exalgo, correct?
Yes, including Exalgo.
Did you have any role in determining who was on your target list?
I don't recall that, no.
Do you know how Covidien determined which prescribers to include on your target list?
I do not recall that.
In his email, Mr. Cunningham refers to other big targets. Do you see that?
On the cover page?
Yes.
Yes, I see that.
Do you have any understanding what he meant when he said, please email me when you have lunches with these targets or any other big targets so I can join in?
No, I don't know what Bruce meant by that. I don't have recollection of what Bruce meant like that.
What separated an ordinary target for Exalgo from a big target for Exalgo at Covidien?
I don't recall.
Did you know at one time and you just since forgotten?
Objection.
I don't recall what I knew or what my knowledge was when I worked for Covidien.
Did you have any opportunity to expand your target list?
I don't recall doing that. They're industry standard. If a provider would move in and be a new provider or move in from another territory, generally you can, well, or as of today, you could submit that name with a change of address and add someone into your territory.
Did you have the opportunity to reduce your target list?
While at Covidien, I don't remember, but again, generally, for the same reason in reverse, you could do that. If someone's moved out of your territory, passed away, retired, is no longer, has a policy of no pharmaceutical reps and no C doctor. Today, there's opportunity for me to remove them off my target list.
I understand that, and I guess I'm talking just specifically focusing on your time at Covidien. Did you have the opportunity to remove or request doctors or other prescribers to be removed from your target list?
I don't recall. I wouldn't doubt that there would be, but I don't recall.
All right, let's take another little break.
Sure.
Going off the record at 12:01.